in the gospel recorded by Matthew, the 14th chapter, and the 14th through 21st verse. And Jesus went forth and saw a great multitude and was moved with compassion toward them, and he healed their sick. And when it was evening, his disciples came to him, saying, "This is a desert place, and the time is now past, and the multitude, send the multitude away, that they may go into the village and buy themselves victuals." But Jesus said unto them, "They need not depart. Give ye them to eat." And they say unto him, "We have here but 5 loaves and 2 fishes. He said, "Bring them hither to me." And he commanded the multitude to sit down on the grass, and took the 5 loaves and the 2 fishes, and looking up to heaven, he blessed and brake and gave the loaves to his disciples, and the disciples to the multitude. And they did all eat and were filled, and they took up off the fragments and that remained 12 baskets full. And they that had eaten were about 5,000 men, besides women and children. God's arithmetic. Now, when I was much younger, not maybe when I was in school, but, soon thereafter, they came up with this notion of the new math. And parents couldn't understand it and couldn't help children with their homework with this new math. Well, if you thought that was difficult, this is really difficult to understand this kind of math. Here you had 5,000 people, 2 fish, and 2 of 5 bounty loaves. And people sat down, 5,000 of them, besides the women and children, and were fed from this meager meal. And when they had all eaten, they gathered up baskets of food. Now this is the new math. God's arithmetic. God's arithmetic. You know, life, some of the great mathematicians believed that life was actually mathematical, that everything boiled down to math, and that may not be totally true, but a lot of it is true. So much has to do with the math. Whenever folks tell me what they're going to do, I sometimes ask them, "How old are you?" And when they tell me they're a certain age, and if they are a certain age, I think to myself, the time for you to do that has already passed. The math doesn't add up. So we are born into a mathematical system. The Bible says that our days are numbered. So we enter into a world of math. So it's all about math. A man that is born of a woman, says the Bible, is but a few days and full of trouble. He cometh forth as a flower that is cut down, and he fleeth also as a shadow, and continueth not. Jesus says that the hairs on our head are numbered. So it's all about numbers. So much is about math. Even relationships are about math. Folks are always counting. And if you get into a relationship with somebody these days, it's very important to know how they count. And men need to know how women count. That women have a totally different mathematical system that men have. And when you deal, and both of y'all are safely married and not going to be any divorces or anything at this point. Y'all are too old to be going through that and foolishness. But anyway, earlier years, there's a whole lot of counting. You find that women got a whole stack of things that you owe them. And you will have anything that you have counted and remembered. So if you're going to be in a relationship, you need to know how people count. Some people pay attention to everything you do for them and no attention to anything that they pay attention to everything that they do for you and no attention to the things that you do for them. They can lend you $10 20 years ago and borrow money from you ever since. And the first day you don't lend them money, they say, I lent you $20. I lent you $10 20 years ago. Now, you don't know folks like that, but I have known all kinds of folks. So when you get into a relationship, it is very important to know how people count. So if you're in a relationship with Jesus, if you're in a relationship with God, you need to know how God counts. God has a mathematical system, and those who give their lives to Christ ought to know something about the mathematical system. You see, men are different from women in churches. Women give preachers the benefit of that. If I hadn't preached anything but women, you just stand up and preach, because women give preachers the benefit of the doubt. You mess up a sermon, they'll say, well, he was sincere and he's trying to do the best he can. Men say, I'm not going back over there. He rambled on a half hour. I don't know what he was talking about. I got this married couple who go to a certain church, and I asked them, they come by the house, I said, how was service? And the woman said, oh, it was nice. Then I asked the man, how was the service? He said, I don't know what she talked about. So men have this thing that stuff has to make sense. So when I preach, I try to make things make sense, because men are that way. Now, so even every sermon that I preach, I try to make sure that if the person listens, the individual will find something in the sermon that makes sense and that is valuable to them, because people are very selfish. They want stuff that is in their best interest. I think that serving God is the best thing that a person can do, because God has a mathematical system that actually rewards people for serving and being a part of that mathematical system. So God's mathematical system is designed so that the people who participate in it always come out on top. I've never been a great pulpit promoter of tithing. But tithing is a very good system. One of the things I noticed about tithing is that I have never heard a person who tithed said they regretted it. Never. I don't care how little or how much money they had. I have never heard a person who tithed and said, I tithed for 10 years or 6 months. I really wish that I had kept that money. Never have I heard that. I've heard some people that tithed and stopped, and things got so bad for them they started back. You see, God's mathematical or arithmetic system is set up for you to benefit. I got into God's mathematical system. Now, the reason I never promoted so much tithe and personal is because I don't keep up with money that well, so I just give. My life, my tithe, my whole stuff goes to Jesus, so I don't have to keep up with it. So, if you want this mathematical system to work for you, there are certain things that you need to do to be involved in. The first thing that you have to do if you want that God's mathematical system to work for you is that you have to be obedient and give yourself totally to the system. You see, one of the reasons that the system doesn't work for a lot of people is because they are not vested. You see, you cannot put your money in the backyard in a tin can or under the mattress and expect the bank to pay you interest. And see, in order for the bank to pay interest, and now the bank's in so much trouble now, they might not be able to pay it, but generally, in order for the bank to pay interest, you have to put the money in the bank. You can't put it in a can in the backyard or under the mattress and expect the bank to pay you interest. You cannot shack up with the devil, old man said once, and expect God to pay the rent. In order for God's system to work, you have to invest in it. You have to be in it totally. And one of the things that you have to do if you're in God's system is that you have to give your first, best, and last to God. You have to give your first, best, and last to God. Because that is what you do to make sure that you are really in the system. Give your first. That's why this tithing thing comes in, because it asks for your first off the top. You give your best, and you give your last to God in the system. Now, and I'm not talking about running to church and giving preachers or listening to the radio or to television and sending folks seed money and all that kind of stuff. This is not about that. This is about giving God your first, your best, and your last. That is to say that this system that you have imported and gotten yourself into, that you've invested in, this God that you're taking on as a partner, you give your best to it. You give your first to it. For example, and you think this is just about religion. It's not about religion. It's about anything that you want to work. If you are a married man or woman, or particularly if you're a man and you go out and you earn money, your first money does not go to your drinking habit or your weekend with the guys or your pleasure. Your first money goes home. Your first money, your best time, your quality time is spent making that relationship work. One of the reasons that some people are not successful in business is because they won't make the personal sacrifice to give their best to their business. You see, there's so many young folks, I want to work for myself. No, you don't. Because working, there's no such thing as working for yourself. I work for myself, in a sense, because I don't need money from the stuff that I do. However, most of the time that I'm working for someone else. I'm going to Indiana tomorrow to lecture. I've signed a contract. Those people are paying me money to come there and lecture. I'm not working for myself. I'm working for them. But in order to be successful in starting and running your own business, is that you have to give your first and best and sometimes last to the business. And if you're not willing to do that, the business is going to fail. Well, it's the same way with God. This relationship that you have with God, if you're not willing to give your best, your first, and your last, it's not going to work for you as well as it would if you gave God your first, best, and last. And some people are not willing to do that. They want to just get into this relationship and just kind of give God, the leftovers. Well, if you give God leftovers, you may get leftovers back. So the first thing you have to do is to give God your first, best, and last. Now, because I'm going to run out of time, I need to finish this in the next few minutes. But this is an interesting little story. Dr. P, a wonderful, wonderful man who pastored Galilee Baptist Church for years and years, and he could tell these funny little stories. And Dr. P said one Sunday there was a woman at church, she didn't have but a dime. And sometimes those churches, those folk will keep on asking you, I need more, we're going to make out this amount and make out this amount. And they said, I give to God and God will pay back. And said, this woman, she just had one dime. And she just looked at that dime and said, Lord, this is my last dime. And the preacher was just saying, give it to the Lord pays back. And she took that one dime, that last dime, and went out there and put it on that offering plate and went on back to her seat. Well, she left church penniless. Few yards down the road from the church on the way home, there she looked down and there was a handkerchief. And she picked up the handkerchief and wrapped up in the handkerchief, it was a $10 bill. And she looked up toward heaven and said, God, if you pay back like this, you can have my money anytime. Well, now, that sounds like Pastor P told that. That sounds outlandish, but listen, you'd be surprised how God pays back sometimes when you enter into the system. The second thing is that always look toward heaven. I will lift up mine eyes toward the hills, from whence cometh my help. My help cometh from the Lord who made the heavens and the earth. When Jesus got ready to bless this bread, he looked up toward heaven. Oh, it is a wonderful thing to remember, to look toward heaven. Sometimes there is no earthly way that you can see your way out of the situations that you get yourself into. Just look toward heaven. There's this woman used to sing this song, earth has no sorrows that heaven cannot cure. There was this lady I met when I first came to St. Louis, great gospel singer, Willie Mae Ford Smith was her name. And I got a chance to meet her, and it was around folks who knew her, and they said she used to sing this song at the convention. And that, it was just such a powerful thing. She would sing, earth has no sorrows that heaven cannot heal. Every child of God ought to remember to look toward heaven. He said, where are you going to get such? Just look toward heaven. Sometimes there are blessings out there that you do not see. Look toward heaven. God lays things in your path that you didn't know. You just look toward heaven, and don't always be looking toward heaven for money. Now, I'm sick of so many folks telling preaching has gone from one extreme to the other. When I was growing up, people thought you had to be poor to go to heaven. Now it seems that they think you have to be rich to go to heaven. And all these preachers telling, God is going to give you your this, and God is going to give you money. God is not in the business of promising people money. God does not give people money the way you think God gives people money. In the first place, you wouldn't know what the money God gave you looked like. If you went out looking for money, you wouldn't even know what money looked like. But you just look to heaven, because sometimes God, see, one reason I don't like people talking about God giving folks money is because if that's what they're looking for, they'd miss out on money. Because some of the things that God gives you that's going to bring you a lot of money looks like a big headache at the time. One of the things that I have that is worth more money than anything else that I have, it was a big headache at the time. When I was on radio years and years ago, I used to go into the radio station. I was young then and very, very, whatever, intelligent, maybe, whatever. But I used to sit at a microphone in a radio station and do a 20-minute sermon week after week with no manuscript. People who heard me thought that I was using a manuscript. And I would sit there with the producers and stuff, and they put the light on, red light, and I'd start talking, and I'd do a 15 or 20-minute sermon every Sunday with no manuscript. Well, because I talk about controversial things, they're always going to have somebody who says that you said something you didn't say, or add to something. That's why I'm so specific now in the way I say things. They'd add to stuff. So I got angry that week, and I said, I'll fix them. I'll write the stuff down. And these tapes, unfortunately, these tapes were erased every 2 or 3 weeks to be used over. They'd erased the tape that I used 2 weeks ago and put this week's sermon on. So those sermons were erased. And when people said that I had said something that I hadn't said, I'd have no evidence that I had not said what they said that I said. So to get even with them, I decided to write the sermons down every week. So I went into the thing and read manuscripts. Now I have about 150 of those manuscripts, which I'm told are very, very valuable. I saved every one of them. I just went from place to place whenever I just all this big thing of manuscripts along. And now those manuscripts cover one of the most turbulent, significant parts of American history, and I have it all on paper, and I did it out of anger. Now I'm told they're worth millions. So you see, sometimes if folks are looking for money, they would never get it, because the stuff that God gives you that eventually becomes very valuable, you don't even know how valuable it is at the time. So stop looking for money. Just look to heaven, and God will send you a way to get you beyond the situation you're in and bless you bountifully, because that's his mathematical system. God's mathematical system is not necessarily give you money. He didn't give any of these people money that day, but he gave them what they needed. He gave them what they needed. God can, you see, in God's mathematical system is that he can add, he can divide, he can multiply, he can do all of that, he can do whatever he needs to do, because he is God. Now here's the thing about when you own everything. When you own everything, you have the power to do something mathematically that other people don't have to do. And that is, you can put anything you want to on the bottom line. When you own everything, you can put anything you want to on the bottom line, because it's all yours. You own the system. You can put whatever you want to on the bottom line. And it all balances out, because all stuff belongs to you anyway. The earth is the Lord, the fullness thereof, the world, and they that dwell therein. When Jesus tells the parable of these people went into the vineyard and worked, and they worked, and people came at different times and put in different numbers of hours, and at the end of the day, he gave them all the same thing. And some got angry, and he said, I gave you what I promised you. In fact, all of you got more than you deserve, so you should never complain about what anybody else got. I have control of the bottom line, says the Lord. Now let me end by telling you about this woman. Years ago, a true story, as many of the examples that I give in my sermons are true stories of people that I know. There was this woman in Fulton whose husband got sick over the years. And her husband, over the years of his illness, had to go to the hospital in Columbia and have both of his legs amputated. And eventually, her husband died and left her with a hospital bill of $65,000. Now, that does not seem like much now. You could almost go to the emergency room with a cold and come back with a bill for $65,000 now. But that was a long time ago. That was in about 1978. So $65,000 was just a lot of money. And this woman was a domestic. When her husband died, she was able to get his Social Security, which was under $1,000 at the time. $700 or $800, I think. And she got this bill from the hospital for $65,000. And she showed me the bill. And she said, well, I'm going to try to pay it a little bit at a time. And I said to her, you never pay this off. She said, oh, I'll pay them $20 a month. I said to her, Josephine, the interest, well, I don't know what I told her, but I thought to myself, the interest is going to be more than that on this money. You'll never pay it off. And she said, well, I'm going to try to pay it, Reverend. Such a good woman. So the first month she paid $20. And the bill came back, it was more than it was the previous month, because the interest was more than the $20. She paid them again, $20, and the bill kept increasing. And she said, I said, I don't know what to do. I said, I don't think they want, you'll never pay it, you'll be dead, and you just can't pay all that. She said, well, I'm going to do what I can. I'm going to try and trust God. She sent him another $20. And then the next week she got a bill. And at the bottom line of the bill, it had nothing but zeros. Zero. And she called her daughter and said, honey, we have to go over there. These people have made a mistake. So they made a mistake. The machines that they got have made a mistake. So we got to go over there. And we're going to go over there Monday and see what's wrong. So Monday, she got her daughter, and they went over there, and she said, I want to see the people in the bill department. And they said, well, what do you want to see them about? He said, well, I got this bill, and there's a mistake on it. And I need to get it right before I pay my next $20. He said, I want to talk to the person who's in charge of the bill. So they finally brought her in. And she sat down and said, the man said, there's a mistake. And she handed him the paper. And he said, no, there's no mistake. And she said, well, last month I owed over $65,000. I sent you $20. And now you come back with all zero. There has to be a mistake. And he said, no, it's not a mistake. It's clear. He said, you can't pay that kind of money. The hospital knows it. We've wiped it out. It's been cleared. God's arithmetic had been put into, this is a true story. God's arithmetic had been put into effect and wiped it clean. And some of you are going to walk up to heaven's pearly gate with all your baggage and all your mess, all the sins and stuff you committed, and going to be scared and going to tell Jesus, tell God, as St. Peter, they say, whoever's going to be there, and you're going to be worried to death. And God can say to you, Jesus paid it all. It's been wiped clean. Oh, it's a wonderful thing to get into God's arithmetic system, God's mathematical system, knowing that Jesus has paid it all and you're free. Oh, what a wonderful thing.